Welcome to the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand, a podcast for leading financial professionals, or rainmakers, and their teams that offer support for securing a successful future. From marketing help to staffing structure, listen and subscribe for actionable insights from advisors and skilled professionals alike.
Hello, and welcome to another Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand. I am your host, Matt Seitz, CMO here at C2P. Today, our topic is inbound retrospective and learnings, and we will get into what all of that means in a second. But our special guest today, Missy Shermer, Digital Account Manager at C2P. I think many of you have had the opportunity to see or meet Missy in some of our agency meetings and marketing roundtables. But Missy, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt, for having me.
Yeah, and I'm personally looking forward to this discussion today because I know you and a couple of our other team members were at the HubSpot Inbound Conference. And for those that aren't aware, HubSpot, a marketing tool that we use here at C2P and over at JL Smith, it's a CRM, a marketing automation software, a lot of sales and marketing tools there. Inbound is their large conference that they host every year, large as in like thousands of attendees traveling around the globe each year gathering. I believe is it in Boston every year, Missy?
It has been so far, but next year it's actually going to be in San Francisco. So that's pretty exciting. They're bringing it to the West Coast.
That's right. That's right. They announced it. Yeah, a special West Coast one. But yeah, it's a big marketing conference really for marketers and salespeople in any industry. So we wanted to make sure that we were sending our team and participating in that, learning and sharing there. I guess I'm a little jealous that you were there and got to go this year. So that's why I'm looking for a discussion, hearing what you brought back from there. And so I guess we can jump right in. If you wouldn't mind giving our audience a brief introduction of what that conference was like, why you were there, why the team was there, and share that with our audience.
Of course. So as Matt said, I was hosted by HubSpot, which is one of the world's leading marketing and sales platforms. We use it here at C2P, and you may have heard of it before as a CRM and a marketing resource. The conference's theme every year usually says something about marketing, sales, and tech. This year, if you look at the moniker on the website, it says a global conference for sales, marketing, and AI. And I could tell you that AI was one of the major themes that happened throughout the conference at almost every session. There's tech product vendors. They have high profile speakers. This year they had Ryan Reynolds and Serena Williams, Ryan Reynolds owns a marketing agency and Serena Williams is an angel investor for a lot of small businesses. So that was why they were there. There's educational sessions and there's plenty of networking. So our team here at C2P, one of the biggest initiatives for us is to be constantly evolving and constantly learning and keeping up, because with marketing, it's always changing. And if you don't keep up and educate yourself, you will be left behind. So we specifically wanted to go to bring back some tips and tricks for our advisors on the agency side, and also some things that we can implement in C2P for our own marketing initiatives.
Yeah, and I know a lot of what they cover, as we shared, is on the marketing and sales side. And we're big on that with our agency. How do we tie marketing to sales? And so a topic that is a big factor of both of those, messaging. That's why we always want to start with the messaging, have the consistency there. Starting there on the email side, because I know there's a lot of facets to that messaging. In your session with Jay Schwedelson, and I know you're a big Jay fan there, that the next few months are not normal and typical for email marketing. Why is that? And what are some things that advisors should be doing now, considering with their email marketing with their clients and prospects?
In the next couple of months, obviously, we have election happening in the US. The election heavily impacts email open rates and click-through rates. Open rates actually drop 2 to 3% each week, starting 6 weeks prior to the election. And click-through rates drop 25% starting in October. So the week after is also pretty rough for email performance. It would probably be a good idea to hold any high impact messaging during these times so that you don't get lost in the sauce. And also another little tip that we found out at that session with subjectline.com and Jay Schwedelson is that one of the biggest and best tips you can use for your subject lines is starting September 1st, you want to start phasing out anything that has 2024 in it. Because historically, content is downloaded 22% less if it has 2024 and it's starting September 1st of that year. So using 2025 has a good impact, or just leaving that year out completely. You just don't want to lose people with your content starting with the subject line. Another thing that's coming to email that is behind the scenes change is preview text is going to be phased out of email subject lines completely. So you have your subject line and then you have the preview text, which is usually the first couple lines of the email. Marketers are starting to see results by incorporating the subject line into the send from address. So, for
Huh.
example, name at firm name, or for the agency at C2P Marketing Services, not just the agency at C2P, not just a name. So you're going to want to start incorporating some of the content from that preview text into your subject line so that doesn't get lost.
Wow, that's interesting. And I guess the tip you made before that makes sense too. Of you hit a certain point in the year, you want to stop looking backwards and start looking forwards. So that's a great thing to keep in mind for our advisors that are doing that. Any other like email marketing tips or formatting tips that you learned at Inbound that could be useful to our advisors?
I have so many awesome tips from Jay Schwedelson. His company, subjectline.com, does research on emails exclusively. That's what all of their stats are. So I have quite a few cute little tips here that we can try to implement for our emails. For example, using negativity as an incentive in your subject line. What do I
Oh,
mean by that? And obviously, we're in finance, so there's some compliance things. You cannot guarantee
yeah.
certain things, but you can use negativity in a way that makes people feel as if they need to open the email. For example, something like what most people get wrong about holistic planning. Okay. Because they might think to themselves, am I getting that thing wrong? So they want to open the email and they want to explore what that thing is.
Yeah, you don't want to be the person that does it wrong.
You don't. And things like avoid these common finance mistakes. You want to make it an actionable CTA that's a little bit negative so that they're more incentivized to open. Another quick little tip that he gave was capitalizing one word that isn't the first word in the subject line. The open rate increase was 18% according to subjectline.com. So that could be a really easy little thing you can implement in your subject lines. Just make sure one of those words is capitalized that isn't the first word. And then also CTA buttons within emails are
Yeah.
less effective than CTA sentences. What do I mean by that? A lot of the time at the bottom of an email, you'll have the body text and then you'll have some sort of button that says download or register, whether it's an event or you have some sort of downloadable content. Instead of saying download, try something that's more personable in a sentence like, I want this content. I want to download this content. Little tricks like that could increase your read throughs as well as your open rates for emails.
Huh. I guess that makes sense too, because you're speaking to them in that call to action. This is for you. This is something that's going to be beneficial for you versus just the one word download or register, things like that.
Keeping it conversational keeps the flow going and gets people all the way through to the finish line.
Yeah. No, that's great. What now? I guess a slight turn there to social messaging. What type of content is trending right now in that area?
So, one of the biggest themes that we heard at the entire Inbound conference in multiple sessions was that lo fi content is king. And what do I mean by lo fi content? You might hear that and think maybe like low quality. They can go hand in hand. There can be people who see lo fi content and think that it's low quality, but really what it means is that it's intentionally created with raw, authentic, and a less polished aesthetic. 72% more likes and comments can be found on LinkedIn by using this lo-fi content as opposed to something that's a little bit too thought out and too heavily produced. This really benefits advisors who run firms and don't have a lot of marketing resources because you don't need a fancy camera or a studio setup to make engaging content. You can take a walk outside, hold your phone in front of you, show the world how you're making your morning coffee, just set your camera up and talk about what you want your audience to know about. If you're just trying to tell them something about an upcoming webinar or a new piece of information that you found out that you think could benefit them, instead of making a high product video where you're sitting very still and you have a suit and tie on and you're delivering this information in such an official way, show them that you're just a person who's going about their day and you have this great information to share them that can't wait. You can't get into a studio to make something heavily produced. You need to tell them right now. That just increases engagement and makes you seem more authentic and like a human, and people trust humans over brands. We're recommending lo-fi content to our advisors within the agency at C2P and also trying to figure out how to do that on our own. There is still a market for professionally produced video when it comes to longer explainer videos within your industry. But for social media posts where you have something you need to let your clients know, just try making a quick video. Act like a vlogger.
Huh. Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned kind of those ad hoc, the lo-fi videos like that, because very similar to what you just described there, I've seen in my feed pop up that a salesperson I know in a different industry does his little sales tip of the day from his car each morning, not while he's driving, but it creates that sense of urgency of he didn't want to start his day without sharing this tip of the day with his audience for there. And I thought that was pretty clever and taking in things like that. And I know you've brought that up before in other places that the power of having it come from an individual versus a corporate page is that can be more beneficial from an engagement standpoint.
Yeah, people are definitely more likely to trust a person over a brand on social media. And that is why the influencer industry has taken off the way that it has in the last 10 years on every social media platform. And you don't have to be an influencer to influence. You just have to be a person who represents a brand and make sure that you as a person are showing as much passion about the subject that you're talking about as like a brand would in a corporate way. But it's from a person, it's more human. So it has more of an impact.
Oh, thank you. And when it comes to social media, we know not everybody has the time to be on top of this all the time. And we hear from some of the advisors that we work with. Did you hear or learn about any programs that advisors could be using to help craft their social posts or how to optimize their presence on social media?
This is going to sound pretty obvious, but AI has taken over in terms of content creation when it comes to social media. There's a lot of different ways that you can use AI to create your content that is pretty low maintenance on your end. For example, if you already have a video in which you talk about something within your industry, you can take the transcript for that video, upload it into AI, and ask it to produce content for you, giving it parameters. So you would say, I want this information in a LinkedIn post. And using
Mm.
best practices for LinkedIn, AI will spit out a post that is in a really like the best engaging format for LinkedIn at that time. Obviously, I will say this anytime I say to use AI, you cannot just copy and paste what AI spits out at you into your post. You need to edit it and make sure that it sounds like you and it sounds like a human. But AI is free most of the time. There's a lot of free versions of AI that exist out there. So I would always recommend that anybody who wants to make content, especially if it's for social media posts, that they start uploading the content that they already have into AI to start training it so that it can start to learn your tone and how you deliver messages. And then when you have something for it to spit out that's specific, it will sound like you, or it'll sound closer to like you. Still need to edit it, but it'll at least get closer if you give it some information and feed it with what you sound like naturally.
Yeah, that combine AI and personal touch there to optimize for the emotional appeal, the behavioral element to it too. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I think you do have to bring that to the automation. AI makes us more efficient, but that brings that personal touch to it and the emotions into it. But also reminding everyone as you're going through this, AI is a powerful tool. Still got to run those social posts through compliance. Make sure, I know it gets exciting. You want to jump to it, but make sure you're doing that. For those listening in that are PCA, also make sure you check out the new PCA social policy that we have out. Trying to make everyone efficient and safe and regulatory at the same time. So, a gentle reminder from our compliance team on that one. Let's move on. It's still related to the messaging side, but SEO. We hear a lot about it, how powerful it can be. Once you get it right, you can be delivering traffic and leads in your sleep. And SEO, for those that don't know, stands for search engine optimization. A lot of the content you're producing, you should always have this in mind. I'm sure they talk a lot about that, but any kind of general themes or tips that you picked up on when it came to SEO there?
Yeah, one of the biggest things that was touched on by multiple speakers was that search engine optimization historically has to do with search engines like Google and Bing, but there's a new world of SEO which is called GEO, which is generative engine optimization, which has to do with AI and your information being found by AI within the internet. And along with GEO, SEO has evolved in that there are many places that people are searching for information besides search engines. There's Reddit, there's YouTube, and I know TikTok isn't something that we use here because it's not compliant, but people use TikTok to search things. I'm just using that as an example of other places that people are searching for things online besides Google and
Yeah.
Bing and Yahoo. So keep those things in mind when you're creating content. Video is obviously like a huge content push for every marketing team that I've ever interacted with. Everybody's switching over to video because it's so good for engagement on social media platforms, but video can also be put on YouTube. It can also be embedded into Reddit. So think about those kind of things when you're creating content where they're going to show up besides just search engines.
No, that's great. So to follow up on that, what are some key things that advisors should be doing on that side to keep in mind for the content that they're creating this day and age?
One thing about content for advisors that we always recommend here in the agency is to have a content calendar. Content calendars don't just have to be for social media, it can be for blogs, it can be for updates that you're making to your website, videos that you're posting anywhere, newsletters, email. We recommend keeping a content calendar because it'll help you understand what type of content you're putting out when. You'll be able to better track what content plays best with your audience at what times. If you don't have great data tracking in your back end of all of your marketing platforms, or for example, if you're just using social media tracking that exists on their platforms and you don't have some sort of marketing tracking or Google Analytics, keeping a content calendar is a good way to actually track some of what your marketing initiatives are doing and how your audience is reacting to those. And also, when it comes to content on social media and your website, the highest engagement that we always see across the board is community engagement and real stories about the real people who work at your firm or yourself. Especially on LinkedIn, people love to see that. I think people are always looking for a way to escape work by seeing something a little bit heartwarming or something relatable on LinkedIn. So just try to think about your content that you're pumping out and how often you're sprinkling in some stuff like that, like real stories of real people from your firm and things you're doing in the community. Making sure that you're sprinkling those things in will help your engagement a lot on social media.
Oh, thank you. And I know the content calendar is one of my favorite pieces too, because it keeps, especially for an advisor in their office, it keeps everything organized and it gets you being proactive with your content development, not reactive. All of the times of, oh, this just came out, maybe we should create something around this. Like you can get ahead of it and be more proactive with all of the content development. What other SEO tips did you learn that you think would be of value to share before we move on?
So, one of the most startling stats that I saw, and not in a bad way, but one of the stats that surprised me the most was actually from NP Digital, which is Neil Patel's agency.
All right.
He stated that websites with a blog generate 75% more organic search traffic and almost 12% more repeat customers. That's a large number.
So
If you don't have a
70%?
75%.
75%.
With a blog. So if you do not have a blog on your website, you're missing out. And you can generate a lot of blog ideas with AI. You can even have them write your blogs and then you just mess with them and make them a little bit more your tone and your messaging. There's ways to get that content out that doesn't involve you sitting down and writing a blog like once a week. So we definitely recommend having a blog on your website, especially after hearing those statistics. Another quick tip that I will say is that if you have a blog on your website, you should absolutely have author bios for your blogs or articles. And even if it's just one author, even if it's just you own your own firm, there's one person and you're the person writing this content, make sure that you have a bio because in the world and the age of AI, with the insurgence in AI, people are looking for content created by real people. So if you have an author bio on your page that people can reference and know that you're a real authority on the subject, that's going to help them trust you a lot more and help them trust your website a lot more. Couple more quick tips. If you're able to see metrics on your web pages, take account which pages are the highest converting for leads and which have the highest traffic. Then the trick to that is you can link your high converting pages into your high traffic pages so that people are moving from your high traffic page where they're all going anyway,
Right.
clicking on those high converting pages and hopefully converting once they hit that page. That's just like a quick little tip that I heard that I thought would be really beneficial for some of our advisors. And then the last one I'll talk about is the difference between long tail and short tail keywords. They don't really call them that, but just normal keywords are 1 to 2 words. And long tail keywords are generally more sentence structure. Think about how you search for things on Google. If you are looking for a recipe for quiche or something, you wouldn't type in like quiche in Google and just see what comes up, right? Because you get way too many options.
Yeah.
You want to type in like recipe for quiche, including whatever ingredients you want to use. So when you're writing, your web pages, when you're doing your social media, thinking about SEO, try to think of how people would ask the questions that you're answering and incorporate those questions into your copy. And then that kind of incorporates in those long tail keywords, which are much more effective nowadays than the regular keywords.
It's very helpful. And I know in the point you made a couple before, I know we talked about one of our team meetings recently of taking those long tail keywords and marrying that with the personality. Because these days, with AI being adapted into Google searches and other search engines, things like that, just the keyword alone is not going to do it from an SEO standpoint now, because people are getting the answer right there in their results. If you want to show up, you have to add the personality and the story behind it. So even if on this industry, if you're taking a regulation update, don't just go and put that on your website. They can go get that anywhere, and they're probably getting it real quick right on that search. It's what's your take on it? How is it going to impact your clients or your region? So marrying the personalization side with the keywords that you just mentioned.
Yeah, putting a human face to it and like a use case scenario to it, as opposed to just explaining what it is. Make it something that people can relate to and incorporate into like their own for financial planning. And yeah, those long tail keywords are definitely ranking better than the regular keywords nowadays for SEO. And it's easy to do because you think about how you would search for things on your own and then just incorporate that into your copy.
Great. So switching gears now onto events and video that we have going on. I guess we'll start with webinars. I know we talk a lot about webinars here for what we do and over at JL Smith. We've had a lot of success there. And they've certainly become more commonplace since 2020 and the pandemic there. But with so much competition and oversaturation, do you think it's worth it for advisors to consider adapting them at this point if they haven't already?
So, what I would say for this is that in order to answer that question, you have to answer 3 other questions, right? The first question is, do you have the resources to promote a webinar? One of the things that I heard in one of the sessions I was in at Impound, they had said that a lot of people don't send enough emails prior to an event or prior to a webinar to actually get the registrants that they want. So you have to have the resourcing available to be able to promote that webinar right. The second question you have to ask yourself is, do you have the time and the resources to make the engaging content that happens in the webinar that people will actually engage with and pull something from that to take out, and then they'll have some valuable content to leave with? You need to be able to create that content. I'm on this podcast right now. I didn't have a ton of time to prepare and I feel like I'm floundering, but you don't want to do that with a webinar.
Oh,
you don't
we're
want to
doing great.
I'm doing great, but you don't want to do that with a webinar. You don't want to have a day to prepare and then just go and wing it. That you want to make sure that they have something to take away, because if they don't have something to take away, they're going to forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third question you want to ask yourself is, do you have the resources and the capabilities of following up with the people who registered and the people who attended? You can't just have your webinar and then expect your inbox to be flooded with new leads. That does not happen. You have to be following up with everybody who attended the webinar with engaging content that makes them want to continue to engage with you. You need to follow up with the registrants who did not attend and make sure that they still get the information so that they know that you're on their side and that they will want to engage with you further because of that, because they trust you. There's just a resource issue. And so that's what I would always, as somebody who works with our advisors at the agency, we do a lot of this for them. We write the copy for the emails that they send out before the webinars. We help them come up with the subject matter. And then we, continue to follow up with the registrants and the attendees and make sure that they're capturing all of those leads. That's a specific function that we perform. If you're going to do it on your own, you need to make sure that you can handle all 3 of those steps. And if not, outsource. If you're with PCA, the agency's here for you. If you're not with PCA, think about outsourcing. There's all kinds of platforms that you can use. to get that stuff done. And that kind of automates a lot of those processes.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I've seen too, especially over the last year or two, that third piece you mentioned is probably the one I see missing the most is the consistent follow up with everyone. The easy button is to hold a webinar and put your Calendly link or whatever scheduling system you use, and then they book and they're on your calendar. That might only be 5 to 10% of the people that registered for it. And you're missing a huge audience if you don't take that time to develop the content to nurture the people that were attending that didn't sign up with you right away. Maybe it just was like they missed it at the end or wanted to think about it a little more. But the biggest piece is missing out on those that registered and didn't attend. We've gone through periods at JL Smith where those are our largest bucket. We love buckets here that we end up getting right fit calls from because there are people that had questions and wanted more information, and something came up with work, with kids, with social life, whatever, that they missed the webinar and they still want to give. So just by following up, it was an easy ask to get them on the calendar. So making sure that they plan ahead for that follow up and nurture content. So I'm glad you brought that up. What other value you think an advisor could gain from consistently hosting more webinars and events?
One of the things that I know that we've implemented in some of our webinars and that they recommended through Inbound was the critical insight that you can gain into your audience and clients with surveys throughout the process. Surveys after they register for the event. There's surveys that if you're using Zoom in particular, I know that there's a survey integration within Zoom, and then sending them post-event surveys helps you gain data, which data is really valuable from a marketing perspective. And a lot of times it's hard to get. So that's one way that you can get a little bit of insight into the people who are interested in your services, interested enough to register for a webinar. You can also nurture existing leads. A webinar that is of interest to an unengaged contact can re-engage them. So you might have contacts that haven't really engaged with you in a while in your CRM. You might have a webinar that hits exactly a topic that they've been wondering about, and that can bring them back into the pipeline. So there's a lot of value that can be brought from like your audience through webinars. And another thing that I haven't really touched on yet that is a huge part of a value of a webinar is that you can repurpose the content from your webinar in a lot of different ways. You can create clips. If there's a video, you can create clips that you can spread those clips out over a month on social media. You can post the webinar on YouTube and use the description of YouTube for SEO value. There's a lot of different content that you can get from just having a live event and making sure that it's recorded well and that you're able to access those assets after. So that's probably one of the most overlooked, I think, values of webinars is the content repurposing. And as a marketing agency, we're always trying to figure out how we can make content work in every way and stretch it as far as it'll go.
Yeah, the old work smarter, not harder mantra.
Yep.
You can do that when you got the quality content there.
Yep.
So for the advisors that are already hosting webinars frequently, what are some strategies you learned at Inbound that could benefit them on taking it to the next level?
One thing that I heard that it was an interesting thought, but makes a lot of sense retroactively was that they said you should focus less on the speaker for the webinar and more on the substance. And I think that when you're creating promotion as somebody who used to promote a lot of events and a lot of past jobs that I've had, it's easy to pull a headshot of the speaker and slap that on a big graphic and say, look who's going to be there. A lot of the time that doesn't mean anything to anybody unless it's like a big name. Like Inbound, for example, they had Ryan Reynolds as like the headlining speaker. And I'm sure that was all. I didn't even know he had a marketing agency until he started talking, because I thought they just had him there because it's Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool 3 just came out. That's why I thought he was there. I didn't know he did marketing. Right. You can do that with really big names, but if you're just doing stuff within your firm and you're just trying to get new leads, focus more on what you're going to talk about and make sure that you're providing a lot of detail to the people who find your webinar about what's going to be involved, because you can give them 2 lines of a headline of what's going to be in there. But if you go in depth with a description, there might be something in there that they see as value that maybe they didn't see in like the overarching headline. So focus more on the substance of your webinar than the speaker. Obviously, repurposing your content with webinars, like I just talked a little bit about how you can use videos and things
Yeah.
like that. But one of the tips that I heard that I thought was really interesting is that if you take the transcript from your webinar and input it into AI and then ask it to recreate content based on the content that you just organically spit out in a webinar, you can get short form videos, you can get social media posts, you can get entire blogs from that you can then put on your website. So making content based on the transcripts of your webinar has a lot of value. And then one thing that I saw that I thought was interesting that I'd never really thought of was if you want to host something a little bit more large scale, you may want to think about hosting some micro events that lead up to the main event. Make sure the content in these micro events is useful and engaging. C2P definitely does this with some of our webinars and trainings. But yeah, give them little tastes of what they're going to get in the bigger event. They called it the Costco sampler effect. When you go to Costco and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of
Everybody
samples.
loves the Costco sampler.
Who doesn't love the Costco sampler? But I definitely bought things at Costco because I tried a sample and I loved
Yeah.
it. So there's something to the idea of giving them a little bit of a taste of what you're going to talk about and then gaining their interest that way.
Yeah, plus it might help get them to the live event where traditionally advisors see a little higher conversion rate there. And as a reminder, tying all that back to your content calendar. So make all this easier with planning ahead with how you break all that down. So what tools do you learn about any tools, or did they talk about any that they could use to innovate their webinar or event strategy?
So, one thing about these conferences that I always tell people is that you have to be prepared for a little bit of a sales pitch because a lot of the people who are speaking at these events paid for a sponsorship to be able to speak and then promote their product. And there are so many tech products out there that are available. I understand that a lot of the people who might be listening to this podcast don't even necessarily have the resources for a marketing team. They're trying to do it all on their own. So, keeping that in mind, I would say that the best tools that came out of this conference are ones that most people know. AI like ChatGPT and Claude are great. They can be used to repurpose content for webinars, help you start promotional and follow up emails, write blogs. With AI, there's a lot of options where you can pay to have a little bit more advanced of a system. But I think that if you train the free ones enough, then you can get very far just using that. They talked about some programs that had survey integrations. I think that integrating surveys into events is really helpful, like I said, for data collection. And what I would say, it's a conference for HubSpot, which is a CRM. There's lots of CRMs. Everybody knows Salesforce. Having a CRM and email automations integrated together is one of the best tools that any solo marketer or DIY marketer can have because it's doing a lot of the work of an admin who would be manually inputting in leads and following up. Like a lot of that stuff can be automated. Just having your CRM and email automations integrated together, I think, is one of the best tools that DIY marketers can have.
Yeah, thank you. And I know for anyone that follows us closely, I know we've had a couple webinars on that on our side for C2P for our advisors, talking about marketing and the power of integrating your CRM and your marketing systems and the power that provides. So if you haven't checked those out, look at our recorded webinars on our site. Missy, thank you. This has been very helpful. I think as we're closing out, like any last minute pieces of advice or stories from the event, from Inbound, that you wanted to share with our audience?
One of the things that I have been thinking the entire time I've been speaking is that I need to touch on how you need to train your AI platform because everybody knows that you can go to ChatGPT and input a question or an idea into the chat and then it'll spit something out at you. But they hammered in the message at Inbound that the best thing you can do is to train your AI by using the same AI platform, not switching between multiple, but sticking with the same platform, using similar threads for similar instances. And also, you can tell AI, I don't like this, or this doesn't work for what I need. And then it'll take that information and use it for the next thing that it spits out for you. A lot of people don't know that. They think you just have to put something in there and you get whatever you get from AI,
Yeah.
but you can tell it what you like. It like listens and keeps track, especially because you need to stay in the same platform. You need to pick one and stay there. That's one of the best pieces of advice I can give about it. AI is pick a platform and stay there. and then just train it, talk to it like a person, tell it like, I need more of this and less than that, less of that. It can be like that rudimentary. And then another thing I would say is there's no shame in the outsourcing game. If you're a single person who runs a firm and you don't have a marketing person, even if you do have one marketing person and they're just like overwhelmed, hire a videographer or go on a podcast. That just do something so that you are using an outside resource to get stuff done. We at the agency at C2P, obviously I'm biased because I work for the marketing agency and we are the outsource. But I just think that a lot of people feel like because organic marketing can be really easy, that it should be. It's not always easy,
Right.
especially if you're the only person doing everything in your firm. So just don't be afraid to ask somebody to help you make a video. Don't be afraid to look into some of the webinar platforms that are out there like Cloud Tech and Afia and 8Digit. I know that a lot of our advisors use those platforms. So yeah, just don't be afraid to ask for help and to outsource some of your marketing initiatives.
No, I appreciate you sharing that because a lot of other advisors, especially those in our network, might not know this. But before we started the agency and obviously took on JL Smith and Dave and all that with the marketing, is we outsourced a lot of our stuff at JL Smith to another agency. I'm a big proponent of using an agency, especially when you're trying to be cost effective in your marketing efforts. What you could spend for one full-time employee at a coordinator level, you could be engaging an agency like ours, but really anyone, and you're getting access to a strategist like yourself or an SEO person, a writer, a graphic designer, a podcast manager, and you get access to all those resources, obviously depending on what your agreement looks like, but your dollar goes a lot further when you engage a group like that. Obviously, it's nice when you have someone in-house to have that, but you definitely get the most bang for your buck, especially when you're starting out with those efforts. So no, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And also, you've given everybody listening and watching homework that they got to go train their AI right now. So,
Yep, go talk to them. It's a robot, but you'll be surprised how the more you prod it and the more that you train it, the more human it sounds. It actually gets scary. So
are you a please and thank you person, Missy?
I do thank my robot because one day when they take over, I want them to remember that I was very polite and that I appreciated all of their help.
So remember that. Say please and thank you to your AI robot. Missy, thank you again. I'm glad you enjoyed Inbound, and thank you for bringing so much of what you learned there back here to share with us and everyone tuning in today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. This
All
was
right.
fun.
Yeah, and thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Never miss an episode by subscribing now to discover new resources and strategies. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help scale and secure your business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.